Agenda item number 5, which is rezoning of planned commercial development DEV 2014-075, Restaurant District at Volusia Mall, PCD. First Amendment.
Can we have some staff, please?
Thank you, Dennis Mrozek, planner with the City of Daytona Beach. The next item is a request by Rob Merrill with Cobco on behalf of Corbett Drew, CBL and Associates for Volusia OP Peripheral LLC, rezoning 2.1 acres of land located at 770 West ISB from BR2 Shopping Center to PCD, Planned Commercial Development, amending the Restaurant District at Volusia Mall PCD agreement to expand the existing PCD boundaries for the purpose of developing an approximately 8,000 square foot restaurant with associated landscaping and parking improvements. I'll give you a location. Everybody's familiar with the location. It's just north of ISB and east of Bill France Boulevard. It's where the existing IHOP restaurant, Bahama Breeze, and Olive Garden are located. There you go, beautiful. The existing land use of the property is retail, and the proposal is to expand the existing PCD boundaries into the mall parking lot, into the BR2, creating a larger planned commercial district. The restaurant district at Volusia Mall was approved in November of 2012, totals 4.6 acres, and again includes a Bahama Breeze, Olive Garden, and IHOP restaurant group. This will be the first amendment to the PD. It adds 2.1 acres for a total of 6.7 acres, and again it goes into the BR2 portion of the mall parking lot. This is to allow for the development of the 8,000 square foot Cheddar's Cafe and Scratch Kitchen. As far as the location, I've got a map up, or a aerial up for you. You can see over on the left-hand side, we've got the Olive Garden, Bahama Breeze, IHOP. Gas station is not part of the PD. The area to be expanded, I've got it outlined over there. Again, into the mall parking lot. With the expansion, you'll see the new Cheddar's will be facing in the front direction toward ISB, with parking and landscaping improvements around the restaurant. There are 2 waiver requests associated with this. This is the requirement of the request to include that all buildings 200 feet wide have a 3-foot change of planes no less than every 30 feet, and a requirement for all walls and windows to make up at least 15% of the wall area. In your staff reports, I went through and I detail a little bit more how they weren't able to achieve that on all of the walls. And then also wanted to provide for you the elevations. One of the things with the varying roof lines and the projections, sometimes the developer will present something that doesn't necessarily meet the intent of the code, or doesn't meet the strict numbers of the code, but it'll meet the intent of the code for a dynamic design of the building. What's been presented in the elevations shows a more of a dynamic type looking building. It's not the boxy building that you typically would see. So those are the elevations that have been provided. I did provide a couple of pictures that I've taken that I found of Cheddar, so you can get an idea of the finished product with some of the roof lines, the materials, the copper roofing, the stone. So it's a dynamic looking building, and it does meet the intent of the design standards, although maybe not meeting all of the requirements. So as far as a recommendation, staff does recommend approval to rezone the 2.1 acres of land from BR2 to PCD, amending the existing PCD agreement to expand the PCD boundaries for the purpose of developing the 8,000 square foot Cheddar's restaurant with associated landscaping and parking improvements. The item is tentatively scheduled to be heard by the City Commission for first reading on November 5th and for second reading on November 19th, which will be a public hearing, and an affirmative vote of 6 shall be required to recommend approval to the City Commission. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Okay, are there any questions of staff?
I had a question. With rezoning that 2.some acres and knowing the amount of required parking for the mall, does that affect the number of spaces for the mall?
That's a good question. The mall actually is overparked, so using some of that parking for the Cheddars, taking some of the parking away and then using some for the Cheddars, there's still ample parking for the mall.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Question, when the IHOP, Bahama Breeze, or Olive Garden were developed, were similar waivers granted for those buildings?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the Olive Garden had similar waivers for some building articulation, and IHOP, we worked with them a little bit. They had to make some changes. That one was approved by staff afterwards, so they had to really be very specific on their standards. But Olive Garden also did have, I believe, a couple of waivers also, similar type waivers. So.
It's not a precedent.
Yeah, no, it's very similar. And again, the intent is a good-looking building, and I think you find that the IHOP, the Olive Garden, and the Bahama Breeze are all good-looking buildings, and I think that the Cheddar's kind of fits in with that type of style. So.
It's that rear elevation that looks like it. That's the only one that looks as though if there were a way. I know it doesn't want windows into the.
Yeah.
I know. I understand. I was just trying to think. I understand. I'm just looking at the rear elevation, which will face, but it's a
facing the other direction.
Right. Just wanted to ask that question. Thank
Yes.
you.
Okay, are there any questions of staff?
I've got a question on the left elevation, where they couldn't meet the guidelines as far as window coverage because of the bathrooms,
Right.
et cetera. Why couldn't they have put in, it looks like they put some,
Some faux windows.
some faux windows in here, some more back there to look like it had the 15%.
Well, I can have the applicant speak to that.
That's what I
and,
thought.
I know that they do have their prototypes that they move forward, and some things that work and some things that don't work. But perhaps Rob can speak a little bit
Because
more
it
about
looked like they
that.
started to do that.
Perhaps.
And they missed the west side of it.
Yeah.
Yep. That's what I thought.
Okay, are there any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Like Parker said, he makes our job a lot easier. And as well as the written report, which with all the exhibits, I actually brought a bigger version of the pictures if you guys want to get any of the details on them. But for the most part, I think I'm here delivering good news to you tonight again. And I forgot to give you my address, 149 South Ridgewood, right here in downtown Daytona Beach with Cobb Coal. I've got Adam Smith here with me from Cheddar's. I want to introduce him. And you may or may not have seen Cheddar's before. I hadn't eaten one myself, so I asked my associate who lives in Sanford to try to go to the one in Sanford. She said she's tried twice, and her husband would not wait. her fiance would not wait 2 hours, so they weren't able to. Very popular, and apparently just a fantastic restaurant. And once again, happy to have someone like that interested in Daytona Beach. So I think the architecture speaks for itself, especially Dennis's picture that he took of an actual restaurant. In terms of compliance with your architectural standards in Article 18, Section 4.3, which unfortunately I have that citation memorized. And the reason why I do is because Bahama Breeze, Olive Garden are good examples. Trader Joe's was a huge example. Right. But there are examples, every one you look at, and you have a cookie cutter code that essentially says things like every 30 feet you have to bump out 3 feet. Well, that doesn't always work. And I've had people who are very famous architects looking at this and saying, how can I do that and make my building look the way I'm supposed to try to make it look? It just doesn't always work. So in this case, it's kind of like when we talk about the signs. You look at it, how does it look to you? If it looks good, well, that's part of the consideration. How does it look? How does it feel? And this is a great looking building. Does it meet the exact standard on all four sides? No. Does it still look good? Yeah. Could it maybe look worse even if it did meet the standards? I think so. I think it looks good just like it is. Ned, as far as the faux windows on every part of it, I'm not sure exactly why the architect couldn't do all that. Maybe it disrupts some of the flow of the stone and the articulation in the wall that he did incorporate where the windows weren't. Some of this stuff is, unless you have that creative eye, I can't tell you why, but they looked at it and said it wouldn't be right there. We did the best we could. We think it looks good. So this is not it is a Dennis mentioned prototype. I mean, I think we do have some of that in it, but at the same time, they were willing to be flexible and change some things around, which they did in the plan as a result of the architect's look at Article 18, Section 4.3.
It's a good-looking building, and it looks like it meets the intent. So.
Yeah. And I think having more new restaurants that are very popular in this area, we're starting to create what we called a restaurant district, and that's a positive thing. close enough to each other that you can walk from one to the other or to the mall, so you don't have to get in your car. It's kind of what we're trying to promote with the smart growth stuff that we've been talking about now for about 5 years.
Any more questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
I've actually eaten at Cheddar in Kansas City. It's very good.
Good.
It was good restaurant. My concern is, again, I'm looking at the safety. One of the things I've noticed in the precedent that we are setting, and it has been coming to all the malls, is that we're putting all these outposts in the mall, and the congestion and the traffic flow and the safety of our pedestrians. That's a concern. And put one more restaurant in that location, especially during Speed Week or whatever, creates that much more traffic and foot traffic. And I'm looking at car flow, the traffic for the automobiles. I know it's in between the two restaurants, which it is will be out there, and that creates a concern for me. Again, I've gone in where Chick-fil-A is at, where the Panera Bread. Excuse me, a lot of traffic, congestion, especially certain times, certain hours of the day. And I'm thinking that we are, again, I look at the Kmart Plaza, where the Kmart is at, they're putting in the new McDonald's and all that. Again, the congestion with that many outlets and outparcels there. And now we're doing the same thing at the mall. And so have we considered that? Had Cheddar's restaurants considered that? The safety of the pedestrians crossing in between from one restaurant to another?
Let me try to respond to that. Restaurants like congestion. So do retail stores. You want to manage it, though, so that it's safe, like you said. We've spent a handful of months now with your staff at TRT going back and forth to meet with the folks that talk about vehicular circulation, pedestrian circulation. You guys have experts on your staff. They pick this plan apart, and they have. And they've given you a conclusion tonight that it's safe and it's well planned. So that's all I can say. I'm not the expert at that. Your experts have told you that already. So I think you rely on them. I can tell you that certainly some of the examples you threw out there, Chick-fil-A being one, it was retrofitted into a corner there that's got some real odd turning movements and such. And when you do that, you really didn't plan for it. This has been planned. Even though the mall was built in the early 1970s and they didn't plan for this restaurant then, it's been well planned to be retrofitted now, and I think it fits here. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay. It answers the question. It's just that, again, I'm thinking and I'm looking, for the safety. If my child go out there or someone I know that goes out there, the possibility of them being hit by an automobile crossing from one place to the next, making sure there's ample parking, especially during certain events, for patrons that's actually going to the restaurants. Because, again, those are some of my concerns. And I'm looking at some of the other malls and the other locations, the other things that's happening, and I'm seeing, landlords or mall owners put in more buildings, and we have less parking spaces, which were previously required when they were first built.
Interestingly, I think that the land development code that you guys passed at your last meeting would prohibit the mall from putting this much parking. So the mall's so overparked that the only time it's ever full is when. Right. And it's not full of people going to the mall. It's full of people walking across the street. So we have this anomaly that a couple times a year here in Daytona Beach that you can't really, make it perfect for that. It is what it is. So as far as the restaurant goes, in the mall operating on normal times, even Christmas time, it's got way more parking than it needs. I've never been there at Christmas time, and I've seen people parking in the outer lanes, in the outer rows. So that's all I got on that.
Any other questions?
Maybe it's a question for staff. Is there a clearly outlined pedestrian path from this building, for example, to the mall proper, to the other? I'm just looking at.
There are sidewalks that are leading to the other area. This is not going to be part of the mall anymore. It's going to be part of the restaurant district.
Right.
That's part of the idea here.
Okay.
Specifically not to the mall.
Okay.
And you'd have to walk through the parking lot just as if you were going to the mall, walking through the parking lot anyway. So when you're walking through a parking lot, you have drive aisles. You got to realize you're walking through a place where cars drive and park.
So if this is
same as it is now.
I'm sorry. If this is going to be part of the restaurant district, then would that be the automobiles, the traffic pattern? Would that be configured around the building? Because right now you can drive,
There's the aerial, so
Yeah.
you can see. The circle road around the
Yeah.
mall will remain the way
Well,
it
that's
is.
what I'm, okay. So that will
And there'll be a
remain.
crossing across it,
Crossing.
Okay, so you.
just like if you were going from the restaurant to the
Gotcha.
mall now.
Gotcha, okay.
Nothing changes really.
So, and the crossing is in the front there? I see a crosswalk
Yeah.
to the retention area, right? And to the sidewalk.
Yeah,
and
you'll see the
retention area.
you see the sidewalk running there to the existing now, and you can cross over to it from
Yeah.
this property.
And that location has a stop sign over there, so and one of the things we reviewed for was to make sure we have a good pedestrian connection to be able to go from one place to the other, so.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Thank you very much. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak in favor of this issue? Is there anybody who would like to speak against? I was just going to make a remark about that. I think there's such a significant difference between the schematic that you get when they show us that picture and then the pictures we saw of the mall, of the store when it was actually lit up. And I think what I liked about it and what I see in some areas is they bring in a lot of stone. And when you bring stone alongside of something else, it breaks it. And actually now you don't have to have it jut out to make it do that. It simply changes your eye look when you see stone along the way. So I feel like based upon those pictures you had, now hold them to it, of course. Make sure you keep the picture there. But anyway, go from there. Okay, I guess we need a motion.
Well, I think it's interesting, your comment about the standards that we have, because ever since those standards have been in place, it seems like we certainly have had an upgrade in all the buildings coming before us. So they are very definite, and yes, there are changes, and I agree with this. Although I'm kind of disturbed, I know there's got to be something wrong with this. I'm not sure what it is. But in over 2 years, we've had a sign ordinance, and this is the first time I think we've had a PCD coming to us with a standard monument sign that's coming in. So
They overlooked it.
I fully expected an 80 or 90 foot pole sign, with the big cheddars up here from the highway that can be seen. But
Thank you very much. We appreciate your help on that.
Make a motion we approve rezoning plan commercial development DEB 2014-075 Restaurant District at Volusia Mall PCD.
second.
A motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Well, we're looking forward to it being here. Get it
Thanks
up
very
quick.
much.
Yep. Thank you.
You have the edge.
Other business? We have downtown.
There's one in Melbourne.
Downtown Baloo Road Redevelopment Area Board.
Melbourne. I guess.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We did meet. It was a very brief meeting. It was so brief that I misplaced my notes. It was brief. I think we had one item, and we were in
Can't
and
remember what it was.
I can't remember what that one item was.
That was really brief.
Well, thank you for your report. Let's see, can we have a Midtown, please?
No meeting this month.
Oh, my
So
God.
might as well brief up.
All right, how about Main Street?
Main Street Board did meet. The only agenda item is regarding a variance for signage on the Hard Rock, temporary signs, real estate signs, like coming soon. And I'm thrilled to have that site labeled soon. It's kind of amazing that they haven't labeled it up till now. So that was all very short, very brief meeting it was.
Okay, thank you. Are there any public comments? Actually, would somebody call John Nicholson, please?
Do a well check.
Let's see, staff comments? Do we have any staff comments?
In your folder, we have provided for you the upcoming 2015 schedule. We've kind of followed the same template, moving Thanksgiving a week earlier and the Christmas one a week earlier. And we'll publish that unless we hear otherwise, but wanted to give that to you first. And lastly, you probably are aware Paul McKittrick is retiring. And in case you had not heard, tomorrow evening they're having a going away retirement celebration for him. And if you hadn't heard about it, it's at the stadium, and there'll be quite a few people there. So I encourage you to come if you get the opportunity.
Okay. Are there any board
Yeah, I've got a comment.
comments? Yes.
I just kind of want to thank staff for anybody that wasn't here last month when we had the land development code. We had several people that came that had some misinformation, that they thought the land development code was going to mess with their stuff, and it was explained to them by city staff, and they understood it and they got it, and that was the perfect example of the public coming forward when they have a concern and getting the correct answers instead of listening to rumors or something else. But they did a great job of explaining, and everybody left satisfied.
Yeah, it was real good. They headed it off at the pass. And
well,
that
they,
was-
the truth,
and that was
they
very
just
good.
said the facts. So that was I thought that was real positive.
Did a good job. Any other comments from the board? Actually, I was just going to mention one thing, because I noticed it's come up 2 or 3 times. I brought it up when we had the thing on International Speedway Boulevard for the project for Hub. And you remember there were 10 variances on that one, and that was just a small piece of land that we had that. And of course, I noticed you made a comment, I believe last month, where you said, you know, we have to kind of keep that in our mind, that we do have these regulations, and do we want them just to. And then you mentioned it again tonight, that I believe you were just saying that we have certain rules. And that, actually, I'd have to say that if you're a very simple person like I am, I mean, you have a rule, and then you tend to follow it if you can. But I do understand that there are some times that, well, for instance, I felt that about the air thing tonight, about the wing. I understand that, but I think it's something we need to discuss sometime. How much do we want to vary from what our rules are? And if these rules are not good, do we need to make some changes in them so that we don't have to vote against ourselves? So anyway, I just thought I'd mention that and see if there's any other.
Well, I think we'll have a lot of rule changes in the new land development code. And that was one of the big reasons for the land development code, just because every building is not 100 by 50 or 50 by 50.
No, you're right.
And so that's how come we have this board, because in some examples it absolutely will not work for that business to come and adhere to that code. And so they explain it to us why it won't work and won't adhere to that. Because one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah, that's true, but then I found out tonight that, for instance, the reason there are so many palm trees on that thing is because the builder simply likes to use palm trees. I mean, that's kind of interesting. I mean, he just likes to use palm trees.
I have to say that on my vacation, as I went from town to town, of course, you know, you take a look and see. I was in one town in Michigan that the theme was Alpine Village. And I noticed that it had chain after chain after chain facility. It had IHOP, it had Home Depot, it had an Arby's. Every single one had a Swiss Chalet trim that had been imposed, including their signage. It was interesting to me that we hear about a cookie cutter code, but we also know that there are cookie cutter buildings, and that it's every time you could replicate the same building. I mean, that's efficient from part of the builder and the franchise, et cetera. That creates the identity. I saw a McDonald's with an Alpine Village. It just was interesting to me that we need. I think our discussion, you know, is one. If we have a standard, it can be met. It needs to be reasonable, and it still needs to have variety. I thought it was kind of chintzy. The Alpine Village got a little bit much, you know, once in a while. But, you know, so there are varieties, the spice of life. But I just wanted to say that when it was imposed, it was met, even by those changes. So cookie cutter works both ways. So.
I think when they're asking for a variance, if staff put down why they believe that it fit, would help me. So if they said the typical property is 2+ acres, and so signage of 10 foot makes sense, This property is 12 acres, 6 times that. So a 25-foot sign works here. We feel it's okay. We believe that we need 15% of windows on the wall. And in this case, because of the bathrooms, you know, we think 8% is adequate. They have added, it looks like they have 2 fall windows. So the 2 fall windows takes it to 12%, and it wouldn't work on this other wall because of this.
Correct.
And so we feel that it meets the intent.
No, that's a good
That would
point.
give me more understanding and clarity, and I go, oh, they already asked the question, they addressed it, and they got a reasonable solution. As opposed to variance, variance, variance. You know, we're supposed to have a 50-foot setback, but in this, the building won't work without a 35-foot setback, and the neighbors across the street screaming because they're gonna have lights in their thing, and they're not getting, and I don't understand why it won't work. They're not showing me on the site plan how this building will go from, 2,000 square foot to 1,800 square foot, therefore the cost per square foot would make the project not viable. I don't, so if I somehow knew that, it makes sense. Or is it just because someone would rather have more room?
I couldn't figure out which view, and I know this is my own inadequacy in reading the plan. I could not figure out the rear view, where that faced. Does that
The mall.
face as you?
The mall.
Well, it
The
looked
north
like it had the
side.
entry. Is it the north side? That's
The
what I
north was
thought.
that really
That's what I thought. But then it
Yeah.
looked like they had the front
North
with the
side.
vegetation. And
They
Yeah, I
used
think it would help when you're
dumpster
given
doors,
those
so they
sometime.
do
Yeah.
it.
Because you
East,
give
west.
north
I
and
was thinking
south.
the mall. I would be surprised they wanted to hear they're doing their whole facelift. I thought to myself, I wouldn't want that.
I think it might help sometime when you talk about front and rear and north and south.
North
I
and
think
south
it'd be
is
good to
better.
have those because we understand better. When you got front and rear, I mean, it's.
I can do that.
Yeah.
That would help.
Are there any more?
But the staff does a wonderful job.
Oh, they
Oh,
do.
yes, there's no
no
question.
Listen,
complaints.
and when I have all the confidence in the world, it's just I feel remiss in doing my job if I don't understand.
No,
And they know something I don't know. And so I'm just sitting here, being a rubber stamp,
Right now in the current code, the primary consideration on those variances is the public benefit, and there's always a letter in there. That's carrying over, but there's a little bit more criteria in the new one, but we'll address it further. But always look at the applicant's proposed public benefit that they're providing.
And I appreciated your comment on the pedestrian and the traffic, because I hadn't even thought about that, but when you think about, so that
Thank
was
you.
really, thank you.
And that's a big concern for me, especially looking at the various malls. My kids are mall folks. They're always at the mall shopping, doing something. So safety is a big thing for me, definitely.
But the thing is, right next door to it is an AT&T.
Right.
They also can have people that leave there and go to the mall or
Yeah.
go to a restaurant.
Well, and you have people driving around in the parking lot and they're going cutting through the parking spaces rather than following a traffic pattern, which makes it even more dangerous. And to add to that,
Well, I think it's a little bit of an advantage that it is back in the parking lot. It's not on the main street, and that does give you some safety help, I think. But anyway, are there any more questions by board? And I think your point's well made. I think the board is doing, actually, I think the staff's doing an excellent job in helping
Yes.
us going through this.
Good discussion tonight.
Yeah, very good discussion. We are adjourned. However, now you have to go home and maybe watch a football game or some dumb thing. We'll call the September meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Makes sense.
Mr. Hurt?
Here.
Mr. Moore?
Here.
Ms. Drago? Here. Ms. Washington?
Here.
Mr. Hoitzma?
Here.
Mr. Davis? Mr. Neal? Mr. Barhu?
here.
Mr. Harper?
Here.
And I'll wait, but I know I'll be counting Mr. Neal present as soon as he
Yes.
returns. So, thank you. Everyone is here tonight.
Each of you received a copy of the minutes for August. Are there any additions or corrections?
Second.
Motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Let's move right on to the new items. Number 4, please.
I'm sorry, excuse me. Okay. That item number 4 is rezoning for Embry-Riddle, DEV 2014-070. That is the Embry-Riddle Research Park West, PCD.
Can we hear from staff, please?
Thank you. Dennis Mrozek, planner with the City of Daytona Beach. This next item is a request by Parker Minchenberg, P.E., of Parker Minchenberg and Associates, on behalf of Rodney Cruz, V.P. of Administration for Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, to rezone 12.7 acres of property located at 800 South Clyde Morris Boulevard from Volusia County Airport, AR, to Planned Commercial Development, PCD, and to provide for a wind tunnel facility with ancillary classrooms, taxiway extensions, hangars, and associated parking, stormwater retention and landscaping and irrigation, and to enter into a PCD agreement. The site location is just west of Clyde Morris Boulevard, south of Aviation Parkway. Got an aerial for you. You can note the proximity to the airport. The land use of the property is general industrial, with a small portion of it is retail. And the request is to rezone from the county airport zoning to the PCD. I think you had some maps in there that maybe were mislabeled PMD, but it is a PCD it is going to be rezoned to. As far as the Embry-Riddle Research Park West rezoning, the site is the former location of the Volusia County Bus Depot. It is 12.7 acres and is directly adjacent to the airport property. This will be a phased development. First phase includes demolition, site clearing, and infrastructure improvements. A total of 200,000 square feet of building. Maximum square footage is proposed, including multiple buildings with hangar facilities and taxiways. I also wanted to give you an overview of how this was going to look in the location. I've got the site up there for you. So I will superimpose the proposed plan that's been provided. Show you the three locations of the proposed buildings. General locations, when the exact buildings are going to be proposed to come in for a site plan, any building over 20,000 square feet is going to be coming to the planning board for approval. And the area that is generally depicted for the hangar and taxiway extensions I've got provided for you up there. As far as Land Development Code waivers, we do have a couple of them for this. One of them is a reduction of the required parking. The applicant will have the ability to reduce the number of required parking by submitting an acceptable parking plan to the city. This allows for mixed-use parking plans. This is something that we're also have proposed in a new Land Development Code rewrite as an option for an applicant to do. Another request is for permitted uses. Requested uses include a wind tunnel facility, classrooms, taxiway, extensions, hangars, other associated uses included in your packet that I have provided. These uses are exceeding what currently is approved on that, so this is a waiver from that. As far as a TIA requirement, the applicant has requested a delay in the requirement for the traffic impact analysis until the time of site plan submittal. At that point, exact uses will be known at that time. Landscaping and building design standards, request to modify those standards consistent with the Embry-Riddle Research Park East. Generally, these standards exceed the minimum standards of the Land Development Code. Also, sign standards. You have a sample of the sign, one of the signs that's being proposed. This is a 25-foot monument sign. It's a sign that's consistent with the Embry-Riddle Research Park East. That's across the street. It's the same sign, and I believe it's going to be consistent with a sign that you're going to be seeing at the main campus. So they wanted to have some continuity with their signage, and this is just one of the signs that they'd be using. As far as a recommendation, staff does recommend approval to rezone the 12.7 acres of property from AR Volusia County Airport to PCD and to enter into a PCD agreement. The item is tentatively scheduled to be heard by the City Commission for first reading on November 5th and for second reading on November 19th, which will be a public hearing. An affirmative vote of 6 will be required to recommend approval to the City Commission. And that does conclude staff's presentation.
Are there any questions of staff? Thank you. Can we hear from the applicant, please?
Good evening. Parker Minchenberg, 1729 Ridgewood Avenue. Dennis, thank you. Another great presentation. He makes it easy for me. I'm basically here to answer any questions. Initially, what we're going to be doing is there is some trash removal that's going to be occurring. There's already been a building demolished, and the first phase will be to get the site ready for these new buildings. Once those buildings are generated, the plans by an architect, I'm sure I'll be back because they'll be over 20,000 square feet to show you the details on what the buildings look like. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Are there any questions? I think the only one I would have, and of course you know I'm going to have to do this because this would be dereliction of my duty if I didn't mention the palm trees. But I understand you're going to have to use, no, not have to, you are going to use significantly more palm trees than we normally would have on.
Yeah, on the plan currently, we have a scenic setback requirement of 25 feet along Clyde Morris, which requires hardwoods. We have proposed 61 oak trees. Typically, those are 2.5, 3.5-inch caliper. We're proposing 6-inch caliper, so we're going to have instant impact once those are put in along Clyde Morris. But Bob, in deference to your love of sable palms, we have about 56 of those going in also.
I just want to say that I'm a little familiar with this property and that I think whatever you put here will be a vast improvement on what had been here in the years previous, okay? And also, I am personally just so thrilled to see this finally moving forward because that was so much what was envisioned when the school district and the school board made this agreement with Embry-Riddle to sell the property. So just personally thrilled, and I know it will be a tremendous improvement.
Thank you, Pat.
I guess I have a question on the sign. It says that signs along Clyde Morris for shopping centers and are 20 foot and 15 for all other uses. Why does this sign need to be a variance? Why does it have to be 25 feet?
A little while back, Rob can probably speak to this. Embry-Riddle came in with a sign program and were allowed to put up the sign you see here. So they have at their main entrance the ability to do a sign like this. And they're, one of my competitors, Ev Cohen and Associates, did the Research Park East. It'll have a sign like this. So we're basically matching those other two signs to have that continuity along Clyde Morris.
And I guess my question to staff is, does this mean that we're setting a precedent along Clyde Morris that we can vary signs because we did it here and we did it here and now we did it here, so now we got 3 25-foot signs. What if another facility wants to have a 25-foot?
In a PD, those are all negotiated individually, so it doesn't have to set a precedence, but they certainly can make that argument to you, and it's your decision to say how you agree with the variance.
Well, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page, that we're going to be approached over and over and over again with variances that, I understand a variance to make a project work or not work, but whether a sign is 20 foot or 25 foot doesn't make a project viable or not viable.
Probably true. Can I try to address it, Mr. Chairman? Rob Merrill for the record, Cobb Cole, 149 South Ridgewood for the university. Ned, I'll remind you that in the past handful of months, this board unanimously approved the other project that Parker referenced that's across the street and a little to the south with not just a similar sign, the identical sign. Same size, same dimensions. And a big part of that was because the sign is not just a sign. It's an airplane tail wing. And in order for it to have that effect, it needs to be to scale that size. And on this big piece of property, it fits, it works. And you guys felt the same about the Research Park East. And we did a complete sign plan for the whole university last year. You might remember that. This board unanimously approved that, incorporating the exact same design. So it sometimes precedent setting on something like this is good. This university has done unbelievably great things architecturally from a sign standpoint. They haven't let us down. Even the palm trees, they do a great job because they've got a lot of them. So they haven't let us down yet. And I think there's a certain amount of case-by-case analysis in these situations, and this is the perfect example of that. It's Embry-Riddle doing good things. The sign's a little bit higher. Well, it's because it's architecturally pleasing, and it needs to be.
Well, I'm just trying to understand if the apartment building down the street decides it wants to have an identical airplane wing type sign out front because they don't have a patent or trademark or control of airplane wings.
Yeah.
And they want it to be 25 foot, and we did it here, here, and here.
It's a good question.
Why couldn't we?
And let me try to answer it. Let me try to answer it legally. If you look at your code and you look at the case law that deals with variances and waivers to the code, it says there's no such thing as precedent. It says you cannot use somebody else's case as the reason for your case. Each case has to stand on its own two legs. and it has to have its own unique situation, hardship or otherwise. And so there is no such thing as precedent when it comes to variances.
That helps me greatly because in this case, I think it's.
You have to look at each one.
I'm just afraid that the little 7-Eleven down the street wants to do the same thing.
Doesn't have that
and
effect.
We put ourselves in a position. So if there's no
a
precedent,
good question,
I
though.
think it's great.
That's why
and
there's
we
so many
should note
palm
the date
trees
and
that
time.
Bob likes, is so that
Thank you.
Actually, I think something else I think we've tried to keep this in mind in the past too. It depends on the size of the property that you're putting on, whether this is, sitting in front of a 7-Eleven, as you said, this would not work very well. But it might work significantly better if you're on working on a fairly large acreage. So actually, I think that's been in our decision in the past somewhat.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions of the applicant?
Thank you.
Does anybody in the audience like to speak in favor of this issue? Would anybody like to speak against? Yes.
Good evening. My name is Chris Larson. I'm a founder and co-owner of Larson Motorsports at 800 South Clyde Morris Boulevard here in Daytona Beach. An interesting dynamic is that we have a lease on this property that has not been, we've been unable to resolve a relocation agreement with Embry-Riddle. The lease exists until, I believe, the year 2021. And the lease is still in full force and effect. And so it's the last thing I want to do is hold up progress. We have this issue that we're trying to work with Embry-Riddle aggressively. And at this point, we haven't been able to terminate the existing lease on the property.
Okay. Any questions?
No, I don't have a question, but.
Would you please use your mic, sir?
Thank you. What's before us is just a zoning change.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have anything to do with your lease.
Okay.
It's just we're changing the zoning from one zone to another.
Okay.
And then so your lease and Embry-Riddle will have to, to work that out because we would have no decision in the legality of that lease at all.
Sure.
Just a zoning change is all before us.
Okay. Yeah. I just thought I needed to say that. We still have property at 800 South Clyde Morris. Got the mail there 2 hours ago. Have a mailbox, and it's a small dynamic. And like I say, I don't want to hold up progress. This is a very exciting time for Embry-Riddle. We've been an affiliate with Embry-Riddle for nearly 11 years now. So
I certainly hope you all can work it out.
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else like to speak against? Board?
Make a motion we approve rezoning plan commercial development 2014-070 ERAU Research Park West PCD.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Motion carries.
It's just, ours is just zoning.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you
luck.
for being here.
Yeah, good luck.
Can we-
Yes.